get the room sound. We'll see how it works. Looks like it's picking up pretty good. It's probably very, very exciting on their side because they get to see somebody meditating for 35, 40 minutes.
No doubt.
You know, it's kind of a, probably one of those white knuckle things. So it's very interesting. We got a couple of new faces, a few new faces. The room is lopsided. If this was a bolt, we would be going like this. That's all right. It's okay. Let's see. Is it okay if I say something about a lot of you, most of you know Terry, who is an intricate part of the Meditation Learning Center, especially when it comes to the one-day retreats because of her cooking skills. Because she does the lunch for the one-day retreats, and people do highly comment on that. And I think eventually the one-day retreats are going to be full, completely full, and people standing at the door so they can come in for the food, I think.
The meditation food bank.
Yeah. So just so they can get that one meal in, you know, and then they'll find an excuse for not sitting for the rest of the day. But yeah, Terry, her business partner, her ex-husband, and the father of her two children passed away last Friday, and so that's very unfortunate. We'll be having a. He was a great guy. He was a really hard-working dude, you know, a friend of mine. Justin, he probably doesn't want me to say this, but Justin there is one of his sons, and so it's very unfortunate. We are going to have a celebration of life for him on the 29th here. And so if anybody's interested in attending that, just send me an email and I'll set you up with the information on that. So if if you know Terry or Ed, which is, you know, her partner, her ex-husband, Ed. One thing about Terry, she kept the name Pfeiffer, which I assumed to kind of keep the family intact.
The kids were young, so I kept the name, yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. And so still have the same last name and everything. Yeah. So it's very, very unfortunate. It's something that we are, you know, all we get more and more familiar with as we age and as we go on. You know, the process of people dying, passing on, and it's a part of our spiritual growth in many ways. It's a mystery at the same time, but it's a part of our growth, you know, as beings. So I wanted to tell a little story. Can you imagine how big stories were before television, you know, and you know, before any kind of recordings or any kind of you just sit around the fire at night and just tell stories, I suppose, you know. And whoever had the best stories was probably the most popular. And then people listened, I suppose, you know, stories. But stories, you know, they contain a lot of information, a lot of lessons for us. And there's a story that I heard many different ways. But if you can imagine, maybe you've heard this before. I was told that it was a Zen story. Virtually, you can take any story and call it a Zen story, and then if it's a Zen story, it's kind of spiritual. It's Buddhist, you know, and it could be any story. But so this is a Zen story that you can use that any story. there's a fellow walking down the road. He's got an axe on his shoulder, and he's off to, do some wood cutting. And people cleared land with their axe, and then they cut wood and used the wood for cooking and for heating and for building their homes, all sorts of stuff. So having an axe was really important, to have a good axe and to be able to use it. You could virtually build an entire house with an axe if you can imagine that. And so having an axe and having how to use it was so important. And this person was walking down the road, and he saw a guy on the side of the road. He was clearing an area, like he's going to build a house there and use the wood for building and for fire and cooking and all sorts of things. But the guy noticed that he was really just hammering away at this tree, and as people did back in those days, they said hi, and the guy stopped for just a moment. He was just, really going at it, sweating and stuff, early in the morning. And he said, "Yeah, it looks like you're doing the same work that I'm about to do." He said, "I'm heading down the road. I'm gonna be clearing a small area about the same size as this, and piling the wood up, for later on." And kind of introduced himself, and the guy said, "Well, I don't really have time, to talk here. I'm really busy. I got to get this done by today." And the guy said, "Okay, well, just one little tip. You might want to, sharpen your axe." And the guy said, "Yeah, that might be a good idea, but I really don't have time. I'm busy. I'm cutting these trees down." He said, "Well, I can sharpen it for you right now if you want me to." And he goes, "I don't have time. I'm cutting these trees." And so the guy goes, "Oh, okay," and the guy starts wailing at the tree again, boom, boom. And so the guy walks down the road, takes his lot, and just kind of taking his time, enjoying the day, and sharpens up his axe, and he cuts down a few trees and sharpens it up, keeps it really nice and sharp, and every swing counts, rather than wasting his energy, every swing. And good axeman, as they would say, keeping the axe really, really sharp, keeping the tool nice and very useful. No time at all, he had the area cleaned and cleared, and he had the trees and all the branches cut just the way he wanted it, and everything was piled up. It didn't seem to take him very long because he knew what he was doing, and he even stopped and had took a lunch break and took care of a few other things and said hi to a few more people as they passed on the road. And so he packed up his things and was heading back to where he came, which was the village of Wahaututu or something, and just making stuff up, right? And so he passed this guy that was trying to cut down these trees before, and he was still going at it. Actually, he only cut down a couple of trees. And he said, did you take a break or something today? And he goes, no, I've been at it. I'm very busy. I don't have time to talk to you. I'm busy trying to cut these trees down. And he said, your tool isn't sharp. You're not using the tool properly. You're wasting all of your energy, all your time, and you're not felling any of these trees. And he took out his axe and he showed him. He took a couple of swings and boom, 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 and pretty soon a tree fell. And the guy couldn't believe it. He realized that he was wrong. That he had what he thought was a wonderful tool. He got too busy to actually use it correctly. He didn't sharpen it, and he faltered. He didn't use it properly. And of course, the moral of the story, the fellow eventually helped him clear that lot. Didn't take him long at all, but the guy learned his lesson. To keep, to have the right tool and keep the right tool in shape, and to be able to use it to do its job. And the moral of the story, you know, from a spiritual standpoint, from the Zen, you know, Buddhist standpoint, is that you know, we can seemingly have everything that we want and that we need, but yet if we don't know how to get it and how to use the tools that we have, we'll never get what we, you know, actually are searching for or seeking for. It won't happen. And so that's in our daily practice, in our daily search for, you know, for happiness, basically. We're all looking for the same thing. We're not looking for anything other than to be happy in our everyday living, right? I mean, that's basically it. And so we're looking and looking and looking, and sometimes we seemingly find something that works, but if we don't, you know, treat it right and, you know, keep that tool sharp, we'll be wasting our time. And so that can be related to a lot of different things. You know, one of the things that comes to mind, you know, just sitting here is our meditation practice, to do it consistently, so that we, you know, we have the ability to notice any improvements or any new ways of handling situations, primarily looking at what comes up for us in the area of emotions and feelings and these states. So the practice that we do, I think most of us are doing what we call Vipassana, or insight meditation. And it's just the practice of being sensitive in many different ways of what is arising for us. You know, we close our eyes, and we can notice the sensations in the body and the feelings and all these types of things, but and the feelings I'm talking about are like the pleasantness and the unpleasantness that we actually feel within the body. And alternatively, we can, you know, look at these emotions or these mind states that come up. And that's really, for many people, that's really where the interesting aspect comes. Because these emotions can also be related to the sensations in the body. You know, if we're fearful of something, we can feel it within the body. If we feel angry for some reason, we can feel it in the body. And so as meditators, we can notice that when it happens. We can notice it when it comes up in the meditation, which is kind of the training ground for our everyday life. So when we get good at noticing these things in our meditation, we can get really good at noticing them outside of our meditation, outside of our formal practice. And after a while, it's as if we have that formal practice that we're going to be doing here in a moment, that formal practice of meditation. And then the rest of our life is just the continuation of that practice. So everything is a meditation for us. And that meditation being that noticing, you know, that watching, that witness of what is coming into our life. And deciding whether we want to, how we want to work it. I mean, do we want to identify by it, or do we want it to control us, or do we want to control it in a way? And I don't mean control it in in such a way that we must have control over these things, but the control that we have is in the noticing. It's in the awareness of what is happening. So I ran into some interesting. Terry and I were at some teachings this weekend, and one of the teachings that I really found interesting was that when we look at the mind and how, for example, we could take most of you have heard me talk about the past and the future, and that anger is contained in the past, and the future contains our fear. You know, just these two emotions. And in the present moment, this oneness, or this presence, you know, is found in this single, or in this present moment, where there really isn't any anger or fear. it might feel that there might be residue left from these, the past and the future, but for the most part in this presence, there is none of that. There is none of these emotions that we normally have when we're thinking of the past and the future. So take the past, for example. If our anger is held in that past, there is still some usefulness in anger. This is one of the topics that we were talking about this weekend, that, for example, how anger can be a real motivator for us at times. We can be angry at something. One time, most of my life I've been a musician, and the dean of the music department told me one time, he said, I'll never be a decent musician because I couldn't read music the way he thought I should be able to read it. And this is before I even started college. And he told me, he said, in order for me to be a music major, it'd be like somebody wanting to be a football coach that has never seen football before.
Nice.
He told me that, and it angered me so much that I started practicing, relentlessly. I mean, a lot of it was pride, now I look back on it, and a lot of it was, just the desire to show him, but in all, as a result, I had no trouble with music. Actually, it was, I had always been a big part of my life, and I made my living off it for years and years. But perhaps if I wouldn't have been a little bit angry at that moment, that wouldn't have happened. So if we take, let's say, 100% of the past, let's just say that roughly 90% of that is not worth even looking at, not worth even storing, in our subconscious. But 10% of it, roughly 10% of it is very useful, because that's our lessons, that's where we come from. Those are the valuable lessons that we've learned in life. So roughly 10%. And we could look at the same thing as related to our future, where our fear lies. We're kind of getting into psychology here, but the false evidence that appears real is found within our future. And most of that fear is absolutely worthless and damaging for us. But let's say 10% of that is useful, 10% of that fear, because after all, fear is a kind of a protection device for us, where we can recognize it and use it, outside of the instinct, intuition, that type of fear. We can use fear to kind of, I might be fearful of retiring broke or something. So there's that fear that I got to save a little bit of money for retirement, for protection, for me and my family, that kind of thing. So there's a certain amount of fear. Maybe 10% of that fear is very useful. So, but what I'm trying to say is, in meditation, we can see all of this. We can notice all this coming up, because we're not trying to intellectually or cognitively see and think of these things, but just by being aware of what comes up for us in the area of these emotions, they can point us in the right direction. And very, very valuable information that we can use to kind of hone our life and to, achieve that happiness that we're looking for beyond, just fulfilling our desires. I'm getting kind of winded here, so we better get going on our meditation. So if anybody has any questions on that, we can discuss that after their meditation practice.
So, you say probably the future maybe 10% that is useful. That's why, what we have is try to recognize it, which one is useful, which one is not useful.
We feel it, and we feel it inside. If it's damaging for us, we can feel the negativity, within the body. If it's useful, there's usually a little bit of inspiration behind it. Get inspired by the lessons from the past, or the feelings of the security from the fear that we can have in the future. So it's like tuning into the body for the most part. And then eventually, it's taking these emotions from the head and bringing them down to the heart. Moving it from the intellect, thinking, and bringing it down to the heart and see how it feels in here. So try that in the meditation and see how it feels for you, then we can talk about
From
it.
intellect to bring it to the heart.
Right,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the hardest.
yeah,
It's hard to do because it is always, like me, I always analyze things and see, okay, if I take this route, the consequences is going to be this, so I better avoid that and be, you know.
yeah, there's a lot there, yeah,
Yeah, that's where in my mind.
yeah, yeah.
um,
So we want to really, really rest and give ourselves permission to kind of go on a little mini vacation for our meditation. And instead of having all these emotions and thoughts and feelings coming up, just allow them to settle down, just like a forest. Like, have you ever seen a pond in a forest surrounded by trees? Very clear and very calm, you know, no waves. And so that's how we want the mind, so that if there is a little pebble thrown in, we notice it. But if there's a lot of wind and a lot of waves, throw a pebble in there, we don't even see it. So if we're in meditation and we get very calm and still, we can see these thoughts and see these emotions. So first of all, we want them to simmer down, you know, settle down. And then we can work with them one by one. And work with them and just by noticing, just by seeing and feeling, you know, within the heart. So we can try that. Those crinkly bottles. Okay, so please make yourself comfortable, everyone. I'll guide us through the first part of this meditation. So with the eyes closed, the back fairly straight if you like, and maybe the chin lifted, placing the hands anywhere you like. Basically, we want a posture that's very comfortable for us. Whether we're sitting on a chair, sitting on a cushion, does not matter. Sometimes in our formal practice of meditation, some people even try lying down, but the problem with that is that they become too sleepy. Some people actually do meditation standing up. And so sitting without having something to support the back has been proven to bring enough energy into the body to keep the body and the mind alert and awake without causing, too much stress, on the body. We just want to be balanced and relaxed, and then we can bring our attention to the breath or whatever we might be using to focus on. We need something to focus on in our meditation practice. The purpose of the meditation, in most cases, is not to only be concerned with our concentration on our meditation object, but to use that as a point of reference so that we can keep coming back to it, keep coming back and again so that the mind doesn't wander off. And so after a while in our meditation, if we use the breath for our meditation practice, and focus on the breath, it's as if we're never too far away from the breath. It's always there for us. So we can find that even though we're not directly concentrating or focusing on the breath, we're feeling the breath, and we're also allowing ourselves to examine things that come up within the mind. And as meditators, we are really the private investigator of the mind. These fine nuances and these feelings and emotions, states, and just different thoughts, the thinking process. For the most part, we've been doing this all day long. And for many people, it might not feel any different than our normal activity. But in meditation, we're asking for that to settle down. And we're allowing that to happen by taking our attention off of the activity of the mind, the mental activity, and focusing on something very mundane and almost boring, and that's the breath. At first, the mind will want to fight that. It'll tell us that this is maybe a stupid practice, that it's not going to help anything, that I'm not noticing anything, I'm not getting enlightened, something must be wrong. But when the mind settles down and we get a chance to look at each individual thought, each individual memory, if it is, each individual emotion, each individual experience as it comes up and shows itself, then it's as if we can learn to, almost in a way, categorize these things, but we're not trying to do anything like that. We're just noticing and just seeing. Not trying to change anything, not trying to fix or correct anything, not trying to hide or place something someplace where we can't see it again. We're just allowing these things to come up and for us to take a look at it. And we're not to dwell on anything specifically, and so we come back to the breath. Sometimes we might stay with the breath for a long time. Sometimes it might just be for a moment. But we will always want to be able to come back to it. So it's like an exploratory mission for a private investigator, but we have a home base that we keep coming back to so that we don't get lost. And this is how we sharpen our tool. And the tool is actually the mind. We find ourselves in this presence once we realize that these thoughts and emotions and these things don't have to bother us. They can be there. They can be showing up just the same as they always did before, but we can still be very, very present. And this is when we realize that this is who we truly are, beyond the identification of the emotions and the thinking and the mental activity. Sometimes it's nice to take a little deeper than normal inhalation of the breath when we're coming back to this room. Do this a few times. So it's just like bringing energy into the body. Thank you. Extremely quiet tonight in this room. Very nice.
Yeah,
No airplanes either.
no, different flight path,
So does everybody have a card? We'll recite this together. This is the loving kindness sutra. Okay. To attain a state of peace, one skilled in goodness should be able, upright, perfectly upright, gentle in speech, kind, and free from pride, contented, easily satisfied, with limited duties and unburdened livelihood, controlled in senses, discreet, reserved, and not blindly attached to groups. One should not commit the slightest wrong that the wise might censor, wishing, may there be happiness and security, may all beings be happy. Whatever beings there are, whether feeble or strong, tall or short, large, medium, or small, microscopic or mammoth, living or none, seen or unseen, living near or far away, born or to be born, may all beings be happy. Let one not deceive another, nor despise anyone anywhere, neither in anger nor in ill will should one wish another harm. Just as a mother would risk her own life to protect her only child, even so, one should cultivate a limitless concern for all living beings. Extend loving kindness throughout the world without limitation, above, below, and across, free of obstruction, enmity, or hostility. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, one should diligently sustain this mindfulness. This is called sublime living. Without holding narrow views, but being endowed with broad vision and avoiding attachment to sense desires, the virtuous are not born again into this world. May each one of us and all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to us. May no difficulties come to us. May we all meet with spiritual and worldly success. And may we have the patience, courage, and the understanding to meet and overcome any problems or any difficulties that we might face. Again, thank you, everybody. Was that hard for anybody, sitting that long? If we have trouble sitting with ourselves, sometimes we should ask ourselves why that is. What don't we want to discover? Yeah, I don't know how we got started that tradition of backing everything up, but you know.
It's a thing.
There you go. There's one more. There you go. All right. Thank you. So, you know, as I was saying, things come up, and you know, that's usually the theme that we talk about a lot. You know, these things that come up in the mind and stuff. And Another interesting thing I heard this weekend is we sometimes call certain emotions like negative emotions. You know, we refer to like the 5 hindrances as like negative emotions, which are, for, you know, desire, aversion or anger, restlessness and worry, doubt, you know, the cloudiness, the boredom, the fatigue that we feel, these kinds of things. But somebody posed the question, are they actually negative? I mean, is there such thing as a negative emotion? Kind of an interesting thing to ponder, because there are, you know, as we were talking about before, about that 10%, there's things that we can find useful in all of these emotions. So, you know, I think for the most part, we call them negative to kind of, you know, there's good emotions or pleasant emotions or positive emotions, and then there's the negative ones. We kind of do that to divide them up somehow, but not necessarily like good or bad. You know, like this is a good emotion or this is a bad emotion. So it's interesting, you know, to not have that duality of right or wrong or good or bad, you know, in something that comes up for us. Like we were saying, there is good in some of the anger. If we have nothing but anger, of course, that's going to cause a problem. It's going to, you know, we'll know that. We'll feel it inside, and it will become unhealthy eventually. And fear can eat us alive too, you know. But if there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, you know, it's like that old, kind of like that old story of, you know, maybe good, maybe bad. You know, that another Zen parable or another Zen story. You remember that from the retreat, where people would, you know, something would happen to this gentleman, and they go, "Oh, you're so lucky, you know, that you found a $10 bill, maybe good and maybe bad, you know." A person can take that $10 bill and do different things with it, you know, and everything is like that, you know. Whatever happens to us, it's maybe good, maybe bad. How are we to know? And it's like that with these things that come up, you know, like, oh, this is a bad one, you know. How are we to know?
The individual thoughts and emotions are not an issue at all, because we have just a wide range of what we feel. It's when things become repetitive thought patterns, that's where it gets us.
Yeah, constant. Coming up again and again, habitual patterns. And we get drawn into that. You know?
Yeah, I was thinking of the reaction to the emotion. That would gauge it. That would probably tell you if the emotion was negative or positive. Like if it was jealousy and it made you react in a violent way, that emotion, then you could go back and say, well, that was negative.
Not the emotion itself, though, but the reaction, like you said.
Yeah.
The reaction to it would be, but then we're already removed from the emotion itself.
Yeah, because you're reactive at that point.
Yeah, the emotion is back there already. You know? How do we react to these things, and why do we react to these things? And are we in a habit of just reacting? You know,
Yeah, they're so attached to the emotion, it just happens.
yeah.
Yeah.
And seeing that, and again, I have to go back to meditation, and seeing these things come up in meditation, how can we help not just see them come up in our everyday life and not react to them? I mean, we can still react to these things. Nothing wrong with reacting, we're human, you know, we're human beings, but maybe not in the same way that we did in the past. You know?
No.
Responding, not reacting.
Responding,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. What is our response to this, or response to that, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of it is emotion, you know, these emotions, and I remember the first time I didn't respond to there's a type of anger that I could feel. I felt like I wasn't being treated very well. It was a car dealership. And no names, but it was the Toyota one that used to be over there. But they're not there anymore.
Definitely not big two. Whoops.
No, that is a name, Big Two. I bought a new car. It was the first new car I ever bought, and there was definitely a tire problem. The tires were, there was a tire problem, and it was eating up tires, and there was something wrong with it, and so I took it in, you know, I was having the oil changed or something, and I asked him to take a look at the tires, and I can't even remember the details now. At that time, it was such a big deal, but I remember the anger coming up. I was talking to him on the phone, you know, and he said, "Yeah, there's nothing, you know, nothing we can do about that. Your warranty doesn't cover tires." And I heard that again and again before, you know, and I knew that, but he told me prior. It was the same guy. He told me something prior, like, if there's a tire problem, we'll back it up. We're one of those kind of companies, you know. You know, my I don't know. My father used to own this company, or so I don't know. I'm just making up stuff now, but he assured me that, you know, we're a good company. We stand behind our product. But it was later in the day, and he kind of forgot about it and goes, "No, we don't warranty tires. You know, who do you think we are?" You know, and I remember feeling that anger come up, but it was like the first time I remember the non-reaction to that before that, how I normally would have reacted. It would have just been spontaneous, you know, how I normally would have reacted by, you know, saying something against that guy, what he was presently saying. You know, we want to be really careful not to, what some people could refer to as chunking it down, or, you know, to like holding it inside, you know, and then, you know, the proverbial cork in the bottle, that cork goes and it's just, you know, you know, that kind of thing. So we have to be very careful with that too. So that the non-reaction, if we want to call it that, has to be genuine. So, and it can only happen really by being aware of what's coming up, what is happening in that moment. It's really the only way, rather than being taken by surprise. You know? And that's not a new concept, or, you know, a revelation or anything like that. It's just how we are wired. And, you know, the Buddha had that figured out, and you know, he had. They counted his teachings in the Pali Canon. There was 96,000 teachings that he gave, but he always said he taught two things. He taught suffering and the end of suffering. Those two things. So he saw that we suffer. You know, we have this stress, and he said that there's a way of ending that. And for the most part, in this daily life, it's realizing that those things that we thought were going to bring us pleasure all the time, that we're seeking, going after, they don't. They don't. They never will, you know? So it's an exploratory life that we have to figure that out, that our pleasure is not going to come from things or even experiences. It's going to come from the ability to not get attached to any of that, not get attached to the idea that I have to find something that's going to bring pleasure, or I have to find something that is going to make my life better somehow. Because we don't. That pleasure that we're actually looking for is inside each and every one of us right now. There's nothing to find out there. Nothing. We can look and look and look, and we won't find it. You know, it's hilarious. And in meditation, we can prove that to ourselves by sitting in this presence. You know, we focus on the breath. I think most of us use the breath. We can feel the breath and we can do different things with it. Everybody probably used the breath in a slightly different way. And then the mind goes out and we go, oh, no, there's just some thinking going on. It's just daydreaming or something. Or we might be really taking an educated look or examining an emotion or something. But we can't dwell on that, so we come back to the breath. And then after a while, we realize that we're in this stillness. And we go, oh, this is actually what I was looking for all that time. You know, it's not a pleasure that says, hey, this is great, you know, this is a great time, you know, but it's that present stillness that says that, hey, this is okay, you know, this is fine, this is it. This is really our makeup, who we are. It's not that red Corvette.
So what happened with the tires?
What was the tires?
What'd you find out was wrong with your tires?
Oh, it was actually the makeup of the car. It was a Matrix. Everybody knows the Matrix. But the Matrix was designed, in its design, the front, it was a little bit, let's see, I can't remember now, it was too heavy in the back. And they eventually found the problem because the front brakes were wearing out really quick as well. Not only in my car, but all Matrixes. The front brakes would wear out quickly. And it would also cause feathering in the tires. And the tires would wear out anyway.
I find a lot of my anger and ill will goes to the dealer also.
Which dealer in particular?
The Volkswagen dealer.
Oh, the Volkswagen dealer, yeah. Well, they sign up for that, those dealers.
So, what you're saying, like for your example, it just acknowledge it, that the emotion is there, I'm feeling frustrated and that's what I'm feeling. You just acknowledge it, you know that it's
Yeah.
there, but you don't.
Yeah, if we try to push it away,
Mhm.
that's exactly what we're not trying to, that causes stress if it's not pushed away. So we're trying to relieve stress.
Okay,
You know, trying to push something away like that is causing stress.
okay,
And if of course, we don't want to have to necessarily welcome it,
okay.
but that would actually be better than trying to push it away. Because in that welcoming, you know, like, let me get a little more taste of that. You know, in that welcoming, it changes the flavor. It's like inviting an enemy into your house. The relationship between you and that enemy will change if you invite him into the home, or her, or whatever it might be. It'll change it has to. And it's the same way with the emotions. But we're not necessarily welcoming and bringing it on, but in some cases, we might want to investigate it and take a look at it. So the investigator of the mind, you know, I think of James Bond going after all these. You know, when somebody's a private investigator, they get hired from somebody to maybe watch somebody else. But if they would get emotionally involved in that, it wouldn't work. Let's say somebody hires somebody to, I think my wife is cheating on me, can you watch her and find out what's going on? Yep, I'll do that. This is how much I charge, blah, 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 blah. But if he would get emotionally involved and go, oh, that's my cousin seeing her, you know, on the side. And I think I know that girl too. I worked with her in the past. We get involved with it, changes everything. And so the investigation itself has to be unrelated. It has to not be attached to it, to what it's seeing. It has to be like this, very open. Just get the facts, take the notes down, and bring the information back. And that's what we're doing. We're watching these emotions. We're getting all the information and just seeing it for what it is. And usually in doing that, it changes. It completely changes. We realize that, and it's kind of like we get the joke. We understand that I don't have to react to this the way I did in the past, or react to it at all, or maybe I want to react to it differently. But the only way we can do that is to be aware of it and really see it and understand it. John?
Earlier you spoke about good emotions versus bad emotions, and I think there is a line generally that we could draw and say, well, this is not a good emotion, and this is a bad emotion. And I think that for me, the definition would be, if I have an emotion that causes harm to you or anyone else or to myself, then that's the definition for me. In other words, like you mentioned, stuffing your emotions, well, that causes people heart disease and high blood pressure and ulcers and all that stuff.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you couldn't say, you would probably say that's a negative emotion, but if you're a person who is always full of drama in your business or your office and causes a lot of turmoil, those emotions could not be good. But if you're a person who always puts on at least a facade of happiness and joy, then maybe that could be a good emotion.
Yeah. In a case like that, we're kind of looking at the reaction to it.
True.
So whether it's a good emotion or a bad emotion, it's really the reaction, or what word were we using before?
The response.
The response, right?
Mhm.
The response to it, being good or bad. One person can, well, we almost have to use an experience. Somebody can have an experience, which we could relate to an emotion. Like let's say some person discovers something, and one person might get angry that it happened, and another person next to them might just think, well, it had to happen that way. That's a part of life, that kind of thing. So there's two completely different responses.
Well,
And-
Buddha supposedly said that you will not be punished for your anger, you will be punished by your anger.
By your anger, yeah. So we're looking at that anger as like there's a reaction to it. It's funny because there's the label there's the label of the emotion, and there's the emotion itself, the anger, and then there's the reaction from that. It's almost like three different things, but it's so subtle. And so if one person, let's say one person has anger and they don't express it and they keep it inside, that can harm them, especially if it's buried in the subconscious. The Buddha didn't use that word subconscious, but that's probably what he meant, is that once if it's stored in there, and that memory keeps coming back from that anger, for example, it can hurt a person. But in the same token, if a person actually reacts to that and gets uses that anger and strikes out, for example, and they can harm somebody, but still in the long run they're harming themselves more than they're harming that other person, most likely.
there's so many different scenarios. I mean,
Mhm.
there's times when anger is the perfect reaction. If you see someone beating a dog or hurting a child,
Mhm.
you know, your anger is, I mean, that's
So in that-
spurs you to action.
So in that situation, is anger, is it bad or good? Or is it just an
Could be good,
emotion?
could be bad.
I would think
Pardon?
it's-
Maybe good, maybe bad.
Maybe good, maybe bad, yeah. So
it
it,
might save someone's life, or, you know.
yeah, yeah.
So that would be, to me, that would be good.
Yeah, the same, it's almost as if the same, I mean, if we have to label an emotion good or bad, it's like the same emotion at one point could be good or at one point could be bad. And so it's almost like, why have that duality in there at all? Just an emotion.
Mhm.
Well, our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents,
Wow.
we wouldn't be here if they didn't have all of these emotions. Because I believe that every one of them just about related to some kind of survival, and they're woven into our DNA. I mean, if you're walking along on the prairie millions of years ago, and there's something you can't identify in the bushes, you know,
Yeah, but
your emotion of fear is,
we're getting into intuition and instinct, though, when we get into that. If you're walking along the prairie, did you say prairie? Is that what?
it could be the jungle or the
Yeah.
prairie or the mountain.
But if-
The hikes, it might be the mountain.
But if we're present, I ran into a rattlesnake the other day, walking down the trail, very present, and then there was a rattlesnake there. And there was no fear or anger or anything like that, but it was instinctual, you know, that there was a snake there, and, you know, just, it was instinctual what to do, like, don't go and pet the snake, you know, that kind of thing. It wasn't necessarily an emotion per se. Well, now we're labeling things, but it was more like instinct.
You inherited that instinct.
I was listening to this video, and this,
The cat and the cucumber?
No.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
this,
I saw that.
this monk, he went into this cave, and he went to, he needed to be in solitude for, he said I was gonna do it for 30 days, but he was in there. Of course, he'd go out for supplies and stuff, and he sat there with a cobra for 90 days.
Hmm.
And he, you know, he describes the relationship between him and the cobra. He would feed the cobra, and then remember that the cobra was there. But every now and then he forgot that the cobra was there. He was like, oh, I'm sorry, you know. And they just had like this thing going on, him and the cobra. Just thought I'd put that out.
That's the best cobra story I've ever heard.
Everybody go home and try
It's on
that.
YouTube.
Yeah,
Find a cobra.
He was pretty still.
Yeah, wow.
There was we're kind of, this is pretty crazy, but there was, when I was in Thailand, I spent a lot of time in Thailand. I think most of you know that, as far as teaching. I had a teacher there. And I never really lived there, but I would go there 2 months out of the year, every October and every April, and spend time with my teacher. And one time he took me to this, way up north, northern Thailand. It's actually nice and cool up there, up in the mountains, and there was a temple that was, it was like a forest temple. And there was another temple nearby that was very, very rustic, and there was a monk that lived there, and he would give a teaching. It seems like it might have been every other night, but I can't remember what the schedule was, and he would just pack the place. All the villagers from around would come and listen to this guy talk. And he wasn't that great of a speaker, really, and I couldn't really quite figure it out until I actually experienced it, but what would happen is there's two snakes that would come out of the jungle when he would start speaking. And one on his left, or one on his right, and one on his left. And they would come every night when he started talking, they'd come and sit right next to him.
Unreal.
Oh.
And so people would come not to hear
Just to
the
watch.
teaching,
this.
but you're like, hey, you gotta see this, you know, and let's go see the monk, you
I
know.
wanna go.
It was interesting. I was there, you know, but it was, you know, whatever it takes, you know, if it's a cobra or a, those weren't cobras, they were something else. They were, I can't remember the names of them. They were like our,
Gardens.
no, they were big.
Constrictors,
They were big.
Boas?
like pythons or constrictors?
Anacondas?
What's the big
Oh,
those rat snakes that we have? They get really big, you know, those kind of things. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know how we got off into the snake.
We got way off.
Sorry about that. It was
My bad.
Joe's fault. Yeah.
Here.
First it was tires, and then we got into snakes.
Snakes.
I had to hear the ending.
Next Monday, NT, how do you pronounce NT's last name? NT, I don't have it written down, it's Nadiago?
Mhm.
I think that's pretty close. Our Sri Lankan friend, he's gonna come in and talk, he's gonna do a workshop and talk about his new book, his latest book. And it's completely free. You know, I'd really encourage everybody to come by and check it out. We'll make sure that there's plenty of room.
Is that at the other place?
No, right here.
Oh, here.
It'll be here, yeah. And if there's too many people, we'll have him, we've done this before, we'll have him talk from this wall, and then we can fill these areas, you know.
What day is that?
We've,
Monday?
Monday.
What
Monday.
time?
I'm gonna be sending out a newsletter to remind everybody, so if you're on my mailing list, you'll get that newsletter. I'll probably send it out tomorrow. If you're not on the mailing list, write your name on the podium, you know, the little book there, and I'll get your email address and I'll send you all information. Also, we have a new summer meditation program starting up next month. Ryan Nimick, if you know him, he's going to be teaching it. He's one of the certified teachers from the teacher training program. And then we got the retreat coming up on
23rd, I think.
the 23rd, one
Whatever
day
that Sunday
retreat
is, I think the 23rd.
of this month. And there's still room.
June,
One day
yeah.
retreat.
Mhm.
Some of the smarter people in this room are signed up for it already.
And you know who you are.
And you know who you are. And that'd be funny if nobody was saying. I'll be there, I know that. And Terry.
And I'll
will
definitely be there.
how it works.
Justin will probably be there. He's
Is it-
thumbs up. Anyway, so you'll probably be getting, most of you will be getting an email tomorrow, you know, explaining that stuff. But try to make it on Monday, that'd be fun to see everybody. And
At what time?
7 o'clock,
Okay.
7 o'clock, yeah. Thank you, everybody,
Thanks, Shane.
and we'll see you next time.